This is the Retirement Bullpen with Richard Warner. The team at Warner Financial Solutions want to help you feel confident about your retirement, no matter where you stand. Get more at warnerfinancialsolutions.com. Now, the Retirement Bullpen.
Outfielder Christian Yelich is currently in his 14th MLB season. He's playing for the Milwaukee Brewers, and he recently hosted his annual home plate charity concert. He had this to say.
You get a lot to deal with people are in town or people want this from you or that from you. Your time gets divided sometimes. You obviously, every player who's at a different point in their career, everybody faces different pressure and challenges based on, where you're at in your career. If you're a rookie, you're in arbitration, you're a long-term contract guy, fighting for your spot. So every guy in the field is kind of facing different challenges and pressure, and there's no one cut way to deal with that, I wouldn't say. I think you kind of have to navigate that yourself. That comes through experience and preparation. And in my opinion, I think if you feel prepared, it helps you deal with pressure. You got to lean into it. The pressure's never going to go away. It's just part of the job. So you have to have the tools and the ability to navigate it and realize that it's a privilege and expectations and pressure, and winning is something that is earned, and you got to lean into it a little bit.
As Christian points out, everyone is at a different point in their career, and the same can be said for retirement. Welcome back to the Retirement Bullpen. I'm here with our host and investment advisor representative, Richard Warner. Richard, how are you?
Alyssa, I'm doing great today. How are you?
I'm doing well. I thought you'd be especially pleased that I pulled an MLB quote.
Yeah, that's a good one for coaching. That's a good one for retirees. I kind of want to play that for my team later this week. So,
well, there you go. 2 for 1. You're welcome. We know that everyone's journey, as he says in the clip, is different. But that said, we're seeing that living alone later in life is becoming more and more common. It's not necessarily the exception anymore. Sometimes it's by choice, but a lot of times it's by circumstance, the death of a loved one. And we know that independence can be empowering, but to Christian's point, it can also come with some unexpected and additional pressures. When you're talking about someone entering retirement alone, and that's today's topic, what are some special considerations for that situation?
So let's start with the death of your spouse, because this is going to affect everybody who's married at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe a small percentage of you will die exactly at the same time or really close, but most of us are going to lose our spouse or be the spouse that's lost.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of changes that happen. Sometimes the spouse that's passing is kind of the financial person of the household, which can, in my experience, create a lot of problems for the one that's left. And it's not necessarily always a male or female thing. It could be either.
Sure.
It used to be years ago, it was always the male handled the money, but that's not necessarily the case anymore. So it can go either direction. So if you're not experienced handling money, that can be a big challenge, on top of the fact that you maybe lost your best friend or the person, if nothing else, you spent the most time with for a good chunk of your life, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Plus your income changes. A Social Security check's going to go away. Your tax status changes. You don't have a married couple filing deduction anymore. You're a single. So your tax situation completely changes, which can create loss of revenue because more is going to the IRS and you're keeping less of it. So those are factors. Now, statistically, more and more people are entering retirement divorced than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And just it's simply the divorce rate is getting higher and higher and higher. So that creates some challenges. Obviously, a lot of times you're splitting up assets. You can acquire new debt because maybe there was a house that had to be sold or split, and then each of you's got to go get your own place now. Obviously, there's the emotional side of it, especially if you're on the end of you didn't necessarily want the divorce, but the other one did. That can create a lot of loneliness. I mean, I'm not here to be a psychiatrist or psychologist today, but I've not experienced, but I can only imagine that it does.
Right.
So there's a lot of different things that are going to potentially change and that you have to address, and you got to figure out on your own in both of those particular scenarios.
Let's talk, sort of break it down into the 2 groups that you did. One where it's death of a spouse. You're used to a certain lifestyle where you have 2 sources of income. You're used to that monthly income, 2 Social Security checks, perhaps a pension, whatever it is. Now you're going to drop down to 1. What sort of steps do retirees, couples heading into retirement, need to be thinking about or putting into place to make sure that in the event, the inevitable event of somebody passing, that there isn't a drastic drop in lifestyle when one spouse is no longer contributing?
This is a big consideration that I feel like is an eye-opener when I'm meeting with a potential couple retiring. Is first off, a lot of people don't necessarily understand how Social Security works in retirement. When you have a married couple going into retirement and you're both receiving a Social Security check, which is fairly typical, and one of you passes away, one of those Social Security checks is going away.
Right.
Yeah, it's the smaller one. It doesn't exactly work out that way, but it's from a number standpoint. The bigger one keeps on going. The smaller one stops at the point of death. Seen some crazy things happen. For example, I can think of one example where the Social Security of the husband was deposited. He passed away the next day and the Social Security sucked the check right back out.
They sure do. It happened when my mom passed.
Yeah, and that will catch people off guard. So the most important thing to understand here is you have to plan in your plan for one of those checks going away, the small one going away at some point. How are you going to offset that income? Because it is going to happen. 100% guarantee it's going to happen to one of you first. And if you don't plan for it, you create an income problem. The problem, I think, with what people think is, well, if he passes away or she passes away, well, my costs or our costs are going to go down. Your costs do not nearly go down with one person passing to the same level as the loss of income.
Right.
And so the same rule applies to a pension. Not as many people have pensions anymore, but your pension is very key to understand your options when you select it. Do you want it off both your lives? Do you want it off one of your lives? These are big decisions. And a lot of people don't think about that as they're making that decision, and they choose the only my life option because it gives the biggest payout. But when they're gone, the paycheck is gone. So in that scenario, you've lost now a Social Security and a pension check. That has just blown up your revenue. So this creates in a scenario where maybe the spouse that's still there has to go back to work, or they have to begin draining assets at a much higher rate than they were planning, which could create longevity of income options for them later in their life. So there's just a lot of things like that you have to be aware of and you have to plan for. So when deciding, is this a good time to retire and what can I generate income on? You have to consider the loss of those guaranteed income sources when one person goes away in your overall plan.
You mentioned longevity, and I know we did a whole episode on that topic, but it bears repeating because it is the greatest wild card that anybody, whether heading into retirement with a partner or solo, will face. We have no idea how long we will live. We could live 5 years after retirement. We could live 15 years after retirement. We could live 20 years after retirement or more, depending on so many factors, some of which are completely out of our control. Talk to me a little bit about those heading into retirement solo. We went into deep dive on planning with a partner and having those hard conversations, but it's a different conversation if it's just you. You have to take full control over what your situation will be if you get sick, if something happens to you that's going to require long-term care. That's a different conversation than if you have a spouse.
That's exactly right, because in most cases, if there's a spouse, they're going to help out in some way. And in a lot of cases, at least in my experience, they do as much care as they possibly, from a physical and emotional standpoint, possibly can do. And a lot of times it's because they're afraid of spending too much of their money on bringing other people in or taking the spouse to a facility. That's a big factor for long-term care. The other one, again, this isn't really where you're going, but it made me think of this scenario that a lot of divorcees don't think about is you potentially can draw Social Security benefits off an ex-spouse and continue to grow yours and switch them later on in retirement, which a lot of people just don't look at it because they don't know it exists. But it is something when you're entering to look into. There's some rules and factors and situational things that come into play, but it's really simple to figure out what would the best way for you to go with a quick call to the Social Security department just to see, because as long as you know your ex-spouse's Social Security number, which you've earned the taxes together, you do, and as long as you know their name and you can prove documentation that you were one time married, they're going to give you that information. And it doesn't affect that ex-spouse. at all. Maybe they're remarried, doesn't affect their partner. It's a number that you potentially could utilize to your advantage as you're entering retirement. So I think it's sometimes is more difficult as a divorcee because there's so many potential ways things can go or work out. But at the same time, you're all alone in that decision-making process. So if you're not seeking help or getting help, you may not be aware of all the potential options that are available to you.
And I feel like it's especially important to have that written plan because in some cases, you may or may not have children. I think of my great aunt. She was somebody that she lost the love of her life in World War II and never got remarried. They were never married before he left. She never got married because her heart was broken and that was her person. And she never had a desire to get married after that. So she aged by herself, no kids. She, loved her great nieces and nephews. She was wonderful to us, but no kids of her own. And so it was especially important for her to have a written plan of her desires, of her estate, of her financial situation, because finding next of kin in a situation such as that gets more and more complicated when you don't have, she was the youngest. She outlived her brothers. Now you're starting to go to nieces, nephews, great nieces, who can you find to be making some very important decisions for you?
Yeah, that's a difficult scenario. I know a situation a little bit like that, not quite to that extreme. But yeah, this person I'm thinking of is very dependent upon, I wouldn't say very dependent, actually doesn't do too bad, to be quite honest. But age is becoming a factor and like scooping the snow.
It will for all of us eventually.
Yeah, scooping the snow, mowing the lawn when we had the storm come through, picking up branches, just things that a lot of us take for granted. But when you're aging and when you're by yourself, you don't have family. A lot of your friends have passed already because you were one of those people that lived a long, long, long time, and not everybody does. You don't know too many people that are actually walking around on the face of the earth anymore. They're all gone. How do you handle that? And what do you do? So putting people around you in an advisory capacity or a legal capacity or having people that are aware of that and can step in particular certain circumstances is vital to your day-to-day living, in my opinion.
I would imagine that's especially important from a financial standpoint and where someone such as yourself could come into the conversation, because having somebody who has an unbiased perspective of your finances and knowing what it is that your wishes are will be a crucial part of being able to solo age gracefully and under your terms, not having some random, family member step in perhaps when you're at a point where you're not as sharp as you need to be or they're taking advantage. Because unfortunately, we hear those stories that exist.
Yeah, when you're on your own like that, you need to have somebody that you can trust. And there's plenty of people in my industry that are going to come in and try to take advantage of a person like that as well. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say so. There's people like that out there, but there's also your quote unquote distant relatives in that situation who you would think would have your best interest in mind, but might simply be, I hate to say this, but might simply be looking at you as a potential paycheck down the road. And so they're taking that into account in their thoughts in helping you make decisions which may not be in your best interest just because of the cost of this or the cost of that. So that you've got to be careful who you get advice from. And it's really ideal probably to have multiple. Unbiased is good. If you've got some family or friends that you trust, that can be very, very helpful, especially if they're not necessarily set to gain anything by you passing away.
Sure.
Or what have you. Not that they're going to off you or something. That's not what I'm trying to say. But you hear stories all the time of people trying to keep people out of the nursing home because they don't want to spend all their assets because it affects their inheritance or different things like that. And you just have to be careful with who you trust and who you get your guidance from. So having multiple people, I think that's where a trusted advisor in our business would be very helpful to somebody like that. But it's somebody you want to start building that relationship with as you're nearing and entering retirement, not necessarily waiting until you're in your 80s or 90s. And then you've got to figure out how to find somebody at that point whom you can trust. And there's a lot of decisions that need to be made between your 60s and your 80s as well that potentially will affect your outcomes.
Absolutely. You mentioned taxes, and I know that we can't have any conversation about retirement planning without factoring in taxes because it can make or break a retirement plan. It's a unique set of circumstances that you have to consider when you're planning for somebody who is retiring alone, whether by choice or by circumstance. Taxes look different when it's just you, yourself, and I. So what considerations do those in that situation need to be thinking about?
So the impact is really, Social Security is not fully taxable. A lot of people don't understand that. You may pay no income tax on your Social Security, depending on your situation. So when you have a married couple, you have 2 Social Security checks. You have a lower amount of income from that standpoint that will apply, even at the worst case scenario, to your tax situation. Plus, you have a significantly higher standard deduction and income numbers to get lower or no or zero tax brackets with in our current tax code. When you take and divide that into 2 people, where it's just one person now, you have a single person's deduction. You only have 1 Social Security check, so you don't have as much of that applying to your tax situation, which a lot of people get confused. Well, how does that? Really, the bottom line is not all of your Social Security check in the highest income levels is going to be taxable. And so the more we can keep those numbers tax-free or low tax, the more income you can keep. And so it really impacts a person's situation. So then as they're entering retirement, do Roth conversions make sense to you to lower that tax bracket? Or was that going to raise your tax bracket up? Or what we take out? Different factors. Do you work part-time? These all will affect your tax situation and what you keep. And it's even more important as a single individual just because the consequences can be more difficult to work around.
I always love to end it with something proactive, something that retirees can have as a takeaway, or those nearing retirement. Give me the one must-do task for someone that's looking at retiring alone.
You need to start a plan. It's that simple. I know that sounds too simple, but so many people don't. So many people I meet later who didn't, and I wish I'd have done this, I wish I'd have done that. I don't know why people are scared to plan. Not everybody is. Or they don't want to talk about it or think about it. They want to stay private. They think they can do it on their own. Do not have so much pride, because a lot of times that's, they've taken care of their divorce, or maybe they've lost a loved one that passed away early, and they take pride in, I've done this, 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 and this. And that's not a bad thing. But retirement planning is probably not your area of expertise. If it is, that's a completely different conversation. But most people, it's not.
Sure.
So make that plan so you can make sure, if nothing else, going into it, even if you change nothing, maybe you got a great plan, but get a second opinion on it.
Everybody's situation is different, and everybody has their own set of pressures. And as we've heard, aging on your own can bring freedom, but it also comes with responsibility and important financial choices. The more prepared you are, the more control you can preserve for the years ahead. If you're looking to start that conversation, you can do so by visiting WarnerFinancialSolutions.com to schedule a complimentary consultation with Richard today. Again, that website is WarnerFinancialSolutions.com. Of course, if you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a future episode. Thanks so much for joining us.
Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Warner Financial. Warner Financial is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth, LLC, IPW, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Warner Financial are not subject to investment advisor requirements. NPN number 7617022. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be considered as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Warner Financial is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Warner Financial.